This is live from the Gold Coast, Brighton. Let me tell you quickly who is talking to you for the next 10 minutes. My name is Daniel Shindler, and I started teaching in 1984 at the age of 23. I know some of you weren't even born then, but I really was the teacher in Roger McGough's poem, for whom chaos ruled okay in the classroom, as bravely the teacher walked in. But for over 30 years, I've been developing my craft, and there'll be lots more about craft in a minute. As a teacher of drama, wellbeing, oracy and project-based learning within the inner cities, the East End of London mainly, and internationally for 3 years, where my practice became glocalised. I fused my inner city practice with a world practice, bringing it home to Whitechapel, East London. Just before Gove, boo hiss, destroyed the drama GCSE, you've got to know when to quit, pay your pension, trust. I became a founding teacher of School 21 in Stratford, East London, and I was the architect of their influential oracy curriculum. Oracy is a lifelong song, the route to emancipation, the way to get past the dominant written word and communicate freedom. And keeping these same core values, which we'll be talking about in a minute, I've now reimagined myself as an ethical chef, as the burns on my arms can testify, for the Real Junk Food Project in Brighton, producing meals for marginalised communities using rescued and surplus food. But I live in drama studios and kitchens, not on screens. However, in the words of Peter Brook, when talking about the purpose of theatre, I think Ed and Graham have created an event in which a group of fragments are suddenly brought together, and for a certain time it can rediscover the marvel of organic life, the marvel of being one. So big breath, as we like to say, breathe and believe. Here goes. I wrote a book before the pandemic. I wanted it in search, reimagining what it means to be a teacher, to be an optimistic and necessary book for all of us. Teachers who've made it this far, new teachers, experienced teachers, and those in the middle. So the next 10 minutes are a call to reimagine. Consider these 3 quotes. Martin Luther King puts it like this: a call to arms, to awake the giant within us all. I often put it before my year 11 tutor group when they were starting to spin away. We're now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. And in this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. This really is a time for vigorous and positive action, but the big fear will be the unknown. Teachers are shackled to context and think they can't rise above their circumstances. Therefore, now more than ever, the notion of journey and uncertainty are critical. I take direction from Paulo Freire, who invites us to adopt a spirit in which we are certain by not being certain of our certainties. To the extent that we are not quite sure about our certainties, we begin to walk toward certainties. The walk towards certainty, you'll need to look it up and wrestle with it. It'll be worth the effort. Because above my desk in my drama studio, a sign reads, "Life is a journey, not a destination." And I don't think it's a cliche. For myself and my students, this walk toward manifested as a social process over an extended period where we let go notions of certainty in order to discover anything long lasting. In the words of one student reflecting on her 5-year drama journey, the journey that I've been on for the past 5 years has not only made me question the world, but it's been the reason that I've taught myself never to diminish what I have and can do. I will forever hold it in my heart. She'd found the steadiness we'd been searching for through some tumultuous years, which in turn had allowed her to finally release her inner self. Her walk toward had stabilized the self into a form and now is in the world as a human being. But for us, as it's clear once again that all certainties are uncertain, we must make sense of everything anew and begin our journey once more. Nothing else will do. So lastly, let's define the space that perhaps teachers might live in as they return to school, a space that many arts teachers will certainly recognise. Teacher, author of Blacklisted and former colleague Jeffrey Boakye describes the search as the effort to walk towards, not forwards or upwards, but inwards towards the self and outwards towards others at the same time. Jeffrey advocates that this is the space in which a teacher lives, ice on the hot plate, living, being in the truest sense of the word. And if all of this is leaving you feeling somewhat uncertain, then perhaps embrace it, as Anish Kapoor does when he says, if there is anything I deeply believe in, it is that one has to somehow learn to live with not quite knowing what is going on. That is the process out of which this thing we call art arises. So in this spirit of uncertainty, to begin, let's reimagine our core values. Let's answer Tony Robbins' question. But if I were to really design my own life, if I were to create a set of values that would shape the ultimate destiny I desired, what would they need to be? Robbins has high hopes. He believes that answering the question can literally change the way a person thinks, feels, and behaves in virtually every area of their life. So pens and paper at the ready. Here's an exercise to do on yourself, with colleagues, with members of your family, the intersection of the private and the public self, which I advocate is where we should live, where in Peter Brook's words, everything feeds the work and everything surrounding it is part of a bigger test of awareness. See where it takes you. Find the time to answer these questions, not now, but later. Check it out on YouTube. Just briefly cast your eye over the slide. A process of reimagining like this will take, firstly, the willingness to be vulnerable. We need to drop the shields we've wielded for both success and survival. Tracy Goss, in her tremendous book, The Last Word on Power, calls out those shields as our winning strategy. We must resist their use as we emerge into the new normal. Resist the temptation to create a new present based on the past. And in the rush for stability, we might build the same boxes and place ourselves and others in them as they were. But if we can chance vulnerability, as we often ask of our students in our studios, we can create a present in the future, climb out of the box, exit our own personal lockdown, and the process of reimagining can begin. For isn't this the creative process we call art? Our core values will take us to a series of what I'm now calling fundamental requisites that we can apply and nurture in our lives and in our practice that make for deeply satisfying experiences. And if you're feeling uncertain what I mean by requisites, stay with me. Just as in the classroom, there has to be struggle if there's to be progress. It's the difference between a classroom that's alive and a classroom that's dead. This destructive, deadly virus has taken lives and stripped us bare. Our values have been questioned as we survive and help others to survive. For many of us, the struggle has been damaging to our physical and emotional well-being. Others may have found that values and priorities have allowed them to thrive. Just look at my requisites through the lens of the pandemic. The building of community, expertise, considering ourselves and others, social resilience, creating different experiences, encouraging inquiry, and being part of a wider nurturing culture. These have all been fundamental in sustaining us. So here's a question. When you return to your classrooms, your studios, your spaces, what are your requisites for creating those deep, long-lasting experiences with your craft, your students, and your colleagues? Make a list and see where it takes you. My requisites, grown organically from what Hattie lovingly describes as gently closing the classroom door and performing the teaching act. Well, I've mined my requisites as I've developed my craft as an arts practitioner, a drama teacher over 33 years. And that's how long it can take. It's a process that takes time. There's a lot of good talk at the moment about doing the work. Well, I like how Richard Sennett expresses it in his fascinating book about craft. Part of craft's anchoring role is that it helps to objectify experience and also to slow down labor. It's not about quick transactions or easy victories. That slow tempo of craft work, of taking the time you need to do something well is profoundly stabilizing to individuals. You will see that core values and leaning into requisites will in fact override the situation and its supposed limitations. It will in fact energize. So there's a few more questions for you to consider. Just have a quick look at that slide. And to finish, as we see those around us struggling to live, we must ask ourselves, what have we been doing and what are we going to do? The pandemic has created a series of seismic shocks to the educational system that require us to answer hard questions. How do we confront ourselves in the face of complex, irrefutable challenges? How do we tap into our own unrealized resources? What's the point of it all? What questions do we face and how do we want to face them? What evasions, tricks and cliches have shown up in our lives? How do we show up with what Artaud called being cruel to myself by committing with a dedication that we may not have shown until now? So which questions jump out at you today? Which questions do you need help to answer? Who might help you answer it? Which questions have you never considered before? Which questions will you talk about with someone in the next 2 days? And which questions do you want to explore in depth, a deep dive? And which question is the one you want to avoid because it makes you feel uncomfortable? And which question do you want to embrace right here, right now? Since retiring, I continue to reimagine myself as an ethical cook with a new craft. 3,000 meals using rescued food since lockdown. No exaggeration, because I'm on a new walk toward, but I take the requisites with me built on core values in my continuing search for deep and lasting experiences. In a world of constant change and shifting priorities, never has the search for craft and meaning been more necessary. It's time to create the long process of reimagining. It will be worth it, I promise you. So if you'd like to read about a lifetime of reimagining, a life lived in teaching, a life lived in craft, a life lived in the arts, if you want to explore these requisites further, then my book is now widely available. Thank you. Stay safe, stay sane, and solidarity to all.